So guys, in this video here I will be changing the oil on the Saab 9.3 new generation turbo diesel. So the Saab 9.3's got this usual feature. If you got like the facelift or like the interior facelift version, you're gonna find this information in your cluster here, but I'm not sure how you get to it. But if you have one of these new generation 9.3s of the first version, you just go into systems or customize button there, down to system settings, it's the first down, and down to service information and service data. And now it tells me that the oil life is at 28%, and I can change all oil if I want in 507 days if I don't drive too much, but I've driven now for around 18,000 kilometers, which is around, I would say, maybe 10-12,000 miles, somewhere around that. So I think it's time to change the oil. So I think the engine takes around 4.2 liters of engine oil. I only bought one of these 4-liter cans today because some of it of course stays in the engine, then you don't really need any more than 4 liters. But of course I would advise you to get one of those smaller cans so you can fill up a little bit so you get to the right level. And also this oil here is GM Dexus 2 approved. This is the rating that you need to look for. In the owner's manual for 1.9 TID, it actually says that you can use or should use a 0 W40 oil, but as long as it's GM Dexus 2 rated, they can also be used. But I'm not sure, but the service center that sold this Saab back in 2006 used this 5W30 oil for all of the oil changes, and it's maybe because of the climate here up in Norway is a little bit different, and therefore they choose to go with this viscosity. And the oil filter as well is needed, and you can also get a new copper O-ring, but I'm not going to get a new one. I will just reuse the older one. So I will place the jack here in the center, because if I jack up here it will be a little bit harder to access, but you can of course use one of the jacking points that you use when you change your tires. But I'm going to use a jack and a hockey puck and then jack it off from the subframe here. It also works just fine. Putting some axle stands will also make you a lot safer. Is the jack where to fail. You also need somewhere to drain all of the oil in, using one of these containers. The parking brake is also set, so the car is not going to move. You can also put something in the back there, so even if you have a bad parking brake, it's going to save you from the car rolling backwards. Then we need to remove both of these things on the top, because if there's not air being able to vent out of this, it's going to not be able to get in there, and everything is going to overflow, which you don't want. And the oil pan is that big aluminium thing, as you can see there, and the bolt on the front is where you drain the oil. I would also actually recommend removing the wheel. You will get a lot more access when you're going to work under here. And also, and I have an axle stand right under the axle here, or subframe, so if the jack fails, it's just going to load up onto that one. 30mm, and of course remember to go anti-clockwise. Just got the bolt loose. then just thread it out and see so everything gets into the pickup here as well. Of course, oil spills everywhere, and I didn't remember, but you see this plug here got these smaller holes, so it's maybe a good idea to let it drain out first, because if you try to thread it out, it's just going to spill out oil all over from those holes and make a mess. So maybe let it drain a little bit before you thread it all the way out. Of course, you want to be using gloves so you don't get oily hands, and also everything of chemicals and oil and stuff that you get in your hands tends to somehow get through the skin and then just into the bloodstream, which can cause cancer and bad things like that in the long run. So use gloves and protection. They probably recommend getting one of these gaskets. I thought it was like just a regular copper one, but it actually got some of this plastic on the inside, so I won't be using sandpaper on it, but yeah, I think it works well using it more than once. So, but I think it's recommended to get a new one of them as well. It's a mess everywhere, but I will have to clean that up later, but I always forget where the filter is located. But you see the drain there, and then we have this thing up here, a little bit back against the firewall, and you need a 32mm to thread the plastic cap off. And you can see this thing here, if you get the hose on there, this drain tap here, you will not have oil flowing everywhere. So you can get it controlled down to the draining thing here, otherwise it would just flow over everything here. So I can't really get the ratcheting to get the oil filter cap off from the underside, because there just isn't enough room to move the ratchet. But you can see it down here, and it's much more simple to take it from the upside when you loosen it, and it's down here. When you loosen it some, it will start to drain. So when you thread the last bit by hand, the rest of the oil is just going to go everywhere from outside here. I'm not sure how you would be able to do it without actually making a mess, but you at least get it out, and then you have to clean later. But tell me what I'm doing wrong in the comments if you know. Old filter is out, then you take new one, pop it in place and push, and it clicks into place, and it should have a loose fit like this. And then you just replace those gaskets there with the new ones that you get. New gaskets on, new filter, and then you just do everything in reverse, put it back in place, just tighten it enough so it's tight down there. You don't want to strip anything, the threads on this, because this is just plastic. So I will thread it in, hand tighten from below, and then use a wrench from the top. All is tightened back. Oil filter is tightened with ratchets, and then also the 30mm oil drain is then tightened, and then we can fill the oil into the filler cap here. So the oil dipstick seems to be within range, and I will therefore just start the car and move it to flatter ground and let it sit for some minutes, and then check back on the oil level. So back in the car again. Since the oil wasn't down to 0%, you don't really get an option to reset the service information. You will just see this. So the trick is then to go back, and then we actually need to set the clock, and then I have to do it manually, and then we'll just take one, we'll just move it some years up. The clock is now updated, and that will do, that will make the computer think that the oil is at, or it says now that it's 0 days until service, and that will give us the option for seeing what kind of service that we would have, or it will also just give us the option to reset the service parameters, as you see there. So now we don't have those options anymore. We can only see the service data. Oil quality 100%, 720 days to service. And then I can reset the clock. For 1 second there you will have a message saying that oil, that you're low on oil, but it just disappears within half a second, so it's not a problem. I know it's oil in the engine, so then I will have the engine on for a little bit so the oil gets thrown around in the engine, and then I will just leave it sitting here on flat ground for some minutes, and then recheck the oil and also see that there isn't any oil under the car that haven't been leaking out. So it seems to be half full, so I will maybe put in a little bit more, but